With regard to God never saying contraception was sinful, negative stuff like dying is an indication to us that God is saying contraception is sinful.
All right, let's see it.
In Genesis chapter 38, according to the law at the time, whenever a brother dies, the succeeding brother takes the dead brother's wife and has conjugal relations in order to raise up children in the name of the dead brother. And then in verse 8 we read this: Judah said to Onan, "Go into your brother's wife and perform the duty of a brother in the law to her, and raise up offspring for your brother." But Onan knew that the offspring would not be his. So when he went into his brother's wife, he spilled the semen on the ground, lest he should give offspring to his brother. What he did was displeasing in the sight of the Lord, and he slew him also. That is, God brought about the death of Onan. Some will counter, well, the Lord slew him because he did not fulfill the law. But elsewhere in Deuteronomy, whenever that does not happen, one is put to public shame for not fulfilling this particular law. Death is not a consequence for disobedience to this law. Here, death is an effect of what? Of spilling that which is necessary for the generation of children. So that would be a biblical text that we could appeal to, that this action is contrary to God's will and thus is sinful.
So the argument being made here is that Onan must have committed some sin above and beyond, or more grave than, simply failing to meet his duties to levirate marriage, because God killed Onan for whatever he did. And in other books of the Hebrew Bible, not Genesis, but Deuteronomy and elsewhere, when they discuss failure to meet the duties of levirate marriage, the death penalty is never prescribed. Therefore, for God to impose the death penalty indicates the sin went above and beyond, simply failing to meet the duties of levirate marriage. Now, there are a whole host of problems with this rhetorical sleight of hand, and not least of which the assumption that whatever punishment God metes out is going to align exactly with the legislation that God prescribes to humans for their own self-governance everywhere in the Bible. But the bigger problem is that this presupposes univocality. It presupposes that we can bring in the book of Deuteronomy to govern how we interpret the book of Genesis and to fill in any gaps in our interpretation or in the data that are presented. And this is problematic because it rests entirely upon the presupposition of univocality. If you do not presuppose univocality, the argument is baseless and falls apart. But univocality is not something that can be demonstrated. Univocality is a dogma that can only ever just be accepted. One just decides to accept it because the data do not support it, and it cannot be demonstrated logically or with any evidence at all.
The bottom line answer to this: that particular action is an active thwarting of the natural purpose of the generative power, and to voluntarily engage in any power while actively thwarting what its natural purpose is contrary to reason. It's a willed, disordered action. And because we're rational animals, we got to live in accord with reason. To voluntarily act against reason, that's in essence what we call sin.
Bottom line, this is a dogmatic attempt to gin up a rationalization from the Bible for a dogma that is not found in the Bible.